This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience with myself, Adam Strong. And today we have a fantastic guest on the show, actually. Her name is Danielle Brown, and she is a 5 times world champion in archery, 2 times Paralympic gold medalist from the Beijing 2008 Olympic Games and also 2012 London. She was the first person to represent England more than anything else in the 2010 Commonwealth Games to compete against able-bodied competitors. And she won gold in that, which is fantastic. She's a mentor, a keynote speaker. She also co-authored a book, which is called Be Your Best Self, which is written for life skills for unstoppable kids, which we'll talk about as well in the interview, which is amazing. So great having you here, Danielle. Really looking forward to today's conversations.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
Yep, very cool. So listen, I know that archery, which interestingly enough, because I've never met an athlete or a competitor who competes archery at a very highest level. It's not one of those sports that you think, wow, like, archery is like, do you know what I mean? But where did that love of archery come for you? Because most people don't pick archery as a kind of one of those, oh yeah, I just do archery type of thing,
Yeah, and you know what? To be honest, I completely agree with you. When I was growing up, I didn't realize archery existed outside of medieval history or fairy story. It wasn't something that I knew much about, but I became disabled. So I love sport. I used to do lots of running around, walking, camping, cycling, and any sport I could do, I did. And I was rubbish at all of them, but I didn't take part in sport competitively. I just did it because I enjoyed it. And going from being super active to not being able to do anything at all was very, very difficult. I've got a condition called complex regional pain syndrome. So it causes chronic pain in both my feet all the time. So that meant that I couldn't run around, couldn't walk very far. And it also took me 5 years to get a diagnosis. So I spent 5 years, thinking that once doctors figured out what was wrong with me, I'd get that cure, I'd get better, and I could go back to doing what I wanted to do. So in this time, I didn't consider myself as disabled. I didn't know about Paralympic sport. I just knew I wanted to find a sport that didn't involve lots of running around and walking. And somebody on the school bus mentioned they did archery. I thought, hey, that sounds a little bit more exciting than swimming, bobbing up and down in a pool, which was really the only other option I felt was available to me. So yeah, 15th birthday, my dad and I did a beginner's course.
Wow, that's amazing. Because I was thinking swimming, right? And then you kind of mentioned swimming just a second ago, and I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, okay, that makes. But your condition, which you mentioned actually, so I mean, how does it work? So what you're saying is, if you're, I suppose, moving around, you're in consistent pain. How does that work?
So I'm in chronic pain all the time. Moving around, sort of any knocks, any bumps, any pressure, whether that's just wearing socks, shoes, that makes it a lot worse. So yeah, obviously I've got to move around. You can't sort of go through life without having that kind of pressure on them. But equally, like there's sort of, it does limit sort of various movements and things that I can do.
How do you manage that pain? Because if you're in consistent pain all the time, I mean, pain's not a nice thing, obviously, but how do you manage that? I mean, you've been obviously having to work through it for many, many years, and trying to come up with, well, not a remedy as such, but what your trigger points are, I suppose now, and what makes it worse, what makes it better, but how do you manage it?
Yeah, with difficulty, as you said, pain is very difficult. It's draining, and I mean, it's been a long journey, really. Sort of from being diagnosed and being put on a cocktail of medication, which I didn't like. The side effects just weren't worth the amount of pain it took away. So for me, a lot of it was about being positive. The way I see it is, I'm in pain now, I'm going to be in pain tomorrow, probably going to be in pain the day after that. So I can either choose to sit around and do nothing, or I can try and choose to live life on my terms. So I think having that mentality as a backbone is really, really important. And then once you've got that motivation, it's then about, how do I achieve what I want to do? So a lot of balancing. And I guess in sort of main way of managing it is, I keep myself busy. If I'm so busy focusing on what I'm doing, the pain's still there, but it's not right at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did get a little bit obsessive with archery, lots and lots of practice.
Very cool. Because you got diagnosed with a condition as a teenager, and being going through the transitions of changes, in puberty and many other hormonal, loads of stuff that goes on, and having to battle that, and the pressures of society, as well as dealing with the condition. I mean, how did you manage that all? Because from my perspective, I think that a lot of pressures that a lot of teenagers go through right now, there's probably 10 times more pressure that they feel than they maybe were 15, 20 years ago, or whatever it is. But then you've got your condition and whatever it is. How did you manage that? I mean, did you go through some real tough challenges with that?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because obviously a disability affects you physically, but psychologically it also has a big impact. And as you say, you're growing up, you're figuring out who you are, what you want to do the rest of your life. And I had this additional problem thrown into the mix, and I worried. I spent a long time living in fear, worrying that people wouldn't be able to see past my crutches, my wheelchair, and actually see the value that lay within. So, it really did fracture my self-esteem. So I went from being this really bubbly, outgoing kid who's an absolute nutter to sort of, becoming really quiet, really shy. And for me, it really was sport that transformed that, getting involved with sport, finding something I was good at, something I could do, something that took my attention and focus away. That sort of really helped me build that confidence back up.
Interestingly enough, actually, that moves beautifully into the question that I already wrote down for here, because I was going to ask you, you mentioned around how sport had a really positive impact on you, and I suppose it was a distraction in a way, right? Because that's what you kind of highlighted. But how do you think that sport has influenced you from a young age, and managing that disability? And how do you think that sport can also help with a lot of teenage kids that are out there, which are going through their own challenges right now? Any advice for those people?
Oh, absolutely. For me, I think sport is so powerful, and I think one of the beauties of sport is that there are so many different ones out there. It's like you said right at the beginning, archery, wouldn't necessarily have thought that. And, of course, I didn't necessarily think of that to start with. And there are so many different ways and levels we can engage with it. And it brings so much from, the social aspect, from mentors and that guidance side of things. I took it up at 15. There were a couple of coaches in the club that really looked after me. And I think having that adult influence who weren't my parents was a really, really important part of my upbringing, in terms of, you've got that support structure there that you can go to ask for advice and get that additional help and support that you need at that stage in your life. And I think there's obviously all the, we know the physical benefits, we know the benefits for our mental health as well. So for me, sport is hugely important. And I think it's kind of that whole path of self-discovery, figuring out what you're passionate about, what you enjoy. Some people, I I love the individual side of archery, rather than, sort of some people love team sports. So it's just really figuring out which bits really appeal to you. And I think the benefits are so profound from that health side of things, but also for giving you a blueprint for success. I think so many characteristics, traits for success, leadership, things like that you can practice in sport. So yeah, it's amazing.
Very cool. With regards to, in terms of, because archery is a very different sport, and you mentioned about it was very much an individual sport, which is true. And, you mentioned about some skills and things like that, but what did a typical, how would you say a typical training day, or, leading up to maybe a competition, what does that kind of look like, on a daily schedule? Because I know that some swimmers and that, and field sports, they can be quite ruthless. I remember when I was an elite athlete, we would train 2-3 times a day and even be in the gym or whatever it is, and we would wreck our bodies. But how did it look like for you?
Yeah, both for me, it was really about that consistency, which is what archery is all about, isn't it? It's about performing the same technique over and over and over again to hit the middle of a target.
Yeah. So,
and taking that very consistent approach to training, even in the lead up to competition. So, as you say, like sports like what you did, you can wreck your body. But for me, it was just about training consistently, shooting lots and lots of arrows. So I'm building up that skill, making sure that my body was in peak performance. So I go to the gym a couple of times a week, but I was sort of always very mindful that if you overdid it there, then that starts impacting things like your ability to aim. So we were aiming at a target 70 meters away. So you had to make sure, and I guess it's sort of a bit like managing the pain. It's all about balance and getting that bit right.
Sure. Absolutely. What would you say? You mentioned like you'd go to the gym maybe sort of twice a week and whatever it is, but I suppose for archery, it's like you mentioned, it's all about repetition, right? Repetition and consistently, and maybe trialing at different distances. What is the average distance? Did you say it was 70 meters?
Yes, yeah, it was. So I was shooting 70 meters for the para team and 50 meters with the able-bodied, but on a smaller face. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So what have you found in terms of because you're a business owner now, you do a lot of speaking now, which is fantastic. You're an author, which is amazing. What have you found in terms of the correlations between, archery, from your perspective, and running a business, and how do they go hand in hand?
Literally copy and paste.
Very good.
Yeah, I think success is success. It doesn't matter what field you're in.
Yeah.
The pathway very much is the same. So, learning how to set goals, so understanding how to figure out what that objective is, and then creating the pathway to get there, and being able to, I guess, notice patterns, to be able to adapt. I think that's sort of where you notice the really good athletes. It's all about that ability to respond and ability to adapt, and the ones that seem to perform better are the ones that are able to recover a lot quicker, whether that's from like a really bad start or what. So I think it's really, I spent a lot of my career trying to figure out how to respond as quickly as possible. If I had a bad start, how could I recover? Because it's not over until right to the end. And I think again that's something hugely important in business, because you've got to adapt. This year has shown that so much, hasn't it? Everyone's got these wonderful plans, and the thing about plans is they never go to plan. And it's how do you change it, and how can you respond as quickly as possible? Because if you don't, that's when it's all gonna fall apart. So I think that's sort of a huge thing I've brought from sport.
Yeah. Were there any, you mentioned around goals, which we'll talk about in a second. Were there 3 or 5 key skills that you thought, I suppose in archery, because, the ability to be consistent and concentrate, and I suppose focus is also a really important thing as well, isn't it? And in terms of running a business, was there any others for you that really, that stood out for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the mindset's really important. So and staying positive and being confident, because I went from being having this amazing career as an athlete to setting up a business and not knowing anything about business, but you still had to, I guess, have that confidence to go out there and make new connections and whatnot. And I think the other one, that you mentioned, consistency, that's hugely important. I think excellence as well, that high performance mentality. It's about delivering excellence. So I think that's important, sport and business.
Love that. I love that. That's a great one. I actually talk about the wow factor, because the wow factor is similar to excellence in a way, but really interesting point of view that is. When it comes to archery itself, being a business, now I'm very competitive, and I'm sure that you're quite competitive as well. Most athletes are pretty competitive. They've got this they've built this, I don't know, appetite for competition and the ability to want to win. Of course, we all want to win. In terms of, because a lot of our listeners are all entrepreneurs and business owners mainly, right? How important was it to assess, just in terms of the preparation, but assess the competition? Would you ever assess the competition? How would you dealing with competitions and other competitors? And how have you, and any tips for business owners and entrepreneurs in terms of assessing competitors and things like that?
So that's a really interesting one, because I always said and still do that my biggest competitor's myself. And not meaning that in a horribly arrogant way. I don't mean that I'm much better than everybody else and it's going to be a walkover. By that, I mean that I can only affect my own performance. So, if I go out there and deliver really, really well, whether that's in sport, whether that's in business, that's great. If I go out there and completely stuff it up, that's on me. So, I think looking at it from that point of view, and I think in some ways it's really important to compare yourself against yourself, because if we compare ourselves to other people, quite often we find ourselves not measuring up or falling short, because we are comparing what we know really, really well, i.e. ourselves, with what we perceive somebody else to be. And you don't know all the sort of inner workings and all the things that go wrong. You just see what they want you to see in many ways. So I think sort of as a foundation, taking that approach I find really, really helpful. But of course, you do need to know what other people are doing, because that then gives you an objective measurement.
Yeah.
So I think that, start with yourself, and then by looking at other people, just seeing what they're doing, what you're doing, what you're doing differently. I think it's important, but equally doing it without that judgment. Yeah.
I suppose it's kind of having this open mind, isn't it? Being open-minded about it without, and you mentioned a really good point there actually about not comparing yourself to other people, because I feel that society, especially in the entrepreneurial business world, is that we're really good at trying to compare ourselves to other people, especially with the likes of social media in there. And do you know what I mean? And it's just, and I just find that it kind of drives me crazy a little bit. And we're all on different journeys. I totally get it. Do you know what I mean?
I know. And do you know what really kind of bugs me? Especially like when you sort of see the business world or entrepreneurs and they're like bragging about, I don't sleep, I work so many hours. And I'm like, well, if you're doing that much, you've really not got the balance right. It's not necessarily something to brag about or something that we think we should be bragging about, but because so many people seem to do that, they kind of wear it as this badge of honor. And it's very bizarre.
It's like this privilege, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a business owner and I work my nuts off type of thing. It's like, well, what do you want? A medal?
Yeah, I'd always say, work smart. Obviously work hard, but it's more important work smart, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I was going to say, in terms of, you mentioned around goal setting, because, you talked about that earlier, actually. Now, I know that goal setting is imperative. And as we're coming towards kind of the end of the year, Do you have any tips for people that really find it difficult to not just set goals? Because I think that, you know, people might say, well, you know, use smarter, you know, all of that malarkey. But is there a particular methodology that works for you in terms of setting your own goals? And do you have any tips or advice for some of our business owners and entrepreneurs that, you know, want to go out at 2021 and just really take things to the next level?
Yeah. So I suppose tips, throw smart goals out the window. No. I struggle with goal setting to start with. And I think partly I was never really told why I needed to do it. I was just told you need to do goals and it helps you get there. And I also found that the different models, some were too fluffy, like SMART. I didn't find that they challenged you enough. And yeah, it just didn't work. So what I did was I basically begged, borrowed and stole different models. And I've created my own model based on, you know, sort of, I suppose, learning, but also taking the best bits from all the different ones out there. And I go through a 5-stage process, which is asks 5 questions. So the first one's who. And I know lots of people start with why, but I think who's more important, setting identity-based goals. Who do you want to be?
Yeah.
I think it's really important because the whole point about goals are it's a behavior change. If you haven't changed your behavior, then, you know, you're not going to get to goals. So I think that's really, really important. Then I look at my why, sort of really understanding that motivation, where that's coming from.
Yep.
And once I've done that and really understand that, then, you know, it's easy to pull the what. So what does that tangibly look like?
Yep.
Once we've done that, the where am I now? Because I think having a level of self-awareness is so important. If you don't understand where you are, then how are you going to make those behavior changes to get to where you want to go? And when we've finally done that, then we can work on the how. And this is sort of really setting the nitty gritty and breaking it down into lots of different actions. So in order for me to get from where I am now to where I want to go, to be who I want to be and achieve that why, this is all the actions I need to take. So and I find that works quite well because I find that it's quite robust. It gives you the motivation. But equally, that action plan is something that you sort of go back to on a weekly basis, so you can adapt it and, you know, have that that ability to respond that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that methodology. The Danielle Brown, by the way, methodology, is the next thing. Okay, guys, listen, don't worry about smart and smarter and any of those generic goal setting methodologies. These are the ones to go. Okay, so we'll just make sure you do that, right? So, but I think that gives our listeners some really good a framework to really work from, and especially moving forwards and things like that. I think that's a great thing. But tell us a little bit about, because I know that you also are a co-author of a book which inspires a lot of teenage kids, you know, and helps them a lot in terms of being the best self. But tell us a little bit more about your book and why teenage kids?
Well, I can't take the credit for that. So my co-author is a wonderful, wonderful human, Nathan Kai. I met him when he was 7 years old.
Wow.
And speaking at an event, what does it take to be the best in the world? And he came up to me and asked if I'd written a book for children about how they could be the best they could be. And I said, no, but, you know, it's such a good idea because all that support exists for adults. You know, so many, how many thousands and thousands of self-help books are there out there, but absolutely nothing for children. And Nathan asked whether we could write one together, which we did. And it was, from my point of view, an amazing learning journey. You know, a lot of this stuff I thought I knew really well, but having that insight of a young person who was able to bring their fresh views to the table, it was really, really great. And we wrote this book together, and it came out last year.
Very cool. Congratulations. I think that's great. I mean, you went from essentially, or we talked about this earlier, you went from athlete to entrepreneur or athlete to business owner, essentially. And you talked about you talked about the fact that, you know, you're not a business owner, requires you transition some skills, But have you found being a business owner any more challenging than being an athlete?
Not really. I think there's so many challenges, similar challenges. I think similar rewards as well. I love competing, and I love that I suppose thrill of competing, and obviously when you win, it's awesome. And I guess sort of in business, it's the same thing. You get that amazing buzz from, whether it's a good meeting or knowing that you've helped somebody, or delivering like excellent performance, great feedback. So yeah, I think sort of the rewards are very similar, but equally challenges are, there's a lot of pressure and demand on your time. You've got to deliver. Goalposts keep changing. There's so many different challenges. And it's just sort of, I suppose, figuring out the plan, what you want to achieve and how to get there.
Absolutely. Because you do a lot of you're also a speaker, and now you probably already remember when your first, I suppose, big speech was, or whatever it is. And I always feel that speaking is a great way to build brand. It's a great way to build connection and visibility and attention. You have any advice for some of our people that want to become kind of more speakers? They want to transition into building their personal brand into speaking. What is it that you've any tips about, I suppose, approaching speaking? Why not really kind of why speaking is a benefit? We already know that, but any tips for people that really kind of want to use speaking as a platform to then grow their businesses? How did you do yours?
I just ran with it, to be honest.
You ran with it. Okay.
Yeah, it was I think it's one of those things that you learn by doing. And I actually started off in schools, which I know for many business owners that, sort of not necessarily where they want to go, but I found that quite helpful because that allowed me to practice my, getting that message out there and seeing what landed really, really well, and what I needed to change. So it is one of those things that until you get out there and actually do it, it's difficult to know. The only other thing I've found quite beneficial in terms of that practice is video. So putting out loads of video content, you kind of get used to, I suppose, how you project yourself, how you get those messages across, and figuring out which bit works and which bit doesn't. And video, actually, I think is really great in terms of making sure you don't sort of get those fillers in, like, or and things like that as well. So I think that can be quite helpful.
Absolutely. I remember one of the things, actually, I remember my first speech, it was at a law firm, right? And it was like one of these lunch and learn sessions. And I remember the first time I kind of told my story and whatever it is. And these people just literally sat there as they were eating their lunches, where I was kind of telling a passionate story. And you probably had this before when you did your first speech. And it just all went Pete Tong. It felt like that I was talking to a bunch of robots.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. And to me, it was, I don't know about you, but it kind of put me off a little bit. It put me off with regards to speaking a little bit. And I suppose it thrumped my confidence in a way, but I suppose you've got to start somewhere. It's a bit like athletics or being an athlete, starting archery. You've got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? That, that I suppose how it lands with people. And I guess one of the worst things I find is, like, ask people to engage and make it interactive, because I think people learn far more that way. And then you sort of ask if anyone's got a question. It's like deathly silence. It really couldn't be any more awkward.
Awkward, yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're right at the front. And, it's really interesting because I spend a lot of time talking about getting out of your comfort zone and actually realizing that it's not necessarily the messages that you're putting across or how you're putting across it, but that can be quite a daunting thing for somebody to do in the audience. So it's then about looking at ways you can make that environment a bit more safe or secure, that people want and feel comfortable to do that. But yeah, I think when it does go wrong, or it's a little bit, when I first started, my voice used to shake and not good.
That's so funny. I was going to say to you, because I'm conscious of time or whatever it is. I know you've got to go. And what are you working on right now? Because I know that you've kind of finished your archery career as such, and you're now transitioned into what you're doing right now. But what's important to you right now, and where do you see yourself in the next 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, great question.
Put you on the spot. Uh-oh.
No, bring out the big 15-year plan. No, I think for me, where I am now is I like to be involved with projects that's all about doing good. You know, so many people helped me get to where I did in sport. So being involved with things that impact for good is really, really important. So I'm part of a team with Kaleidoscope, which is all around helping make changes for the better for people with disabilities, from an investment point of view, from a recruitment point of view, and helping companies understand that disability side of things. I think it's really important as well, in order to push myself out of my comfort zone in a professional capacity, to do it in a personal one as well. So next year I've signed up for a world record attempt.
Ooh.
Yeah, looking forward to. So to become
what's the world record?
So largest team of disabled people to scuba dive in the open sea. So
Whoa.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be one of the very few members of the team who's never scuba dived before. But yeah, the whole point of it really is to change perception around disability, you know, really start focusing on what a human being can do rather than what they can't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. Really interesting. Well, I know, being a scuba diver, you're going to love that, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic. I think if they reincarnated me as anything, I'd probably come back as a fish. In a nice way, not like, you know, purely because I love the ocean and kind of, you know, the ecosystems and the life and whatever it might be. So really fascinated. So yeah, really cool. So listen, really enjoyed today's conversations and chats, and thank you so much for spending a bit of time with us. And you've given us some great golden nuggets as well for some of our listeners. So guys, hope that you've enjoyed today's show. Danielle, just want to say thanks very much for being on today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Really enjoyed it.
And guys, listen, I was going to say, if you want to reach out to Danielle, please do so on her social media links below, and, you know, mention the Game Changers experience that you listen to the podcast. And if you have any questions or whatever it is, then those guys can get in touch with you, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really look forward to hearing from you. Fantastic. Listen, guys, have a fantastic day, week, month, whenever you listen to this. Have a good one. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Game Changers experience. I hope that you got some amazing value, some great insights, and golden nuggets that you can implement into your business straight away. I would really, really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on the button below. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.